Hello and welcome back to Ed Talk. Today our topic revolves around the genealogy of physical education. First off, let's start with the basics. What is genealogy? Priya, can you shed some light on this for our viewers and how we'll be using it in the context of today's talk?
Yeah, Nat, that's a great question. Essentially, genealogy can be compared to tracing a lineage. A genealogical perspective believes that events do not occur in a linear and technological pattern. Through the use of historical documentation, we can see how certain phenomena have developed over time. In the specific context of today, we'll be looking at how physical education regulates bodies and how bodies have subsequently been constructed and reconstructed. We're paying special attention to how schools and educational institutes govern this construction on bodies.
One of the words that we looked at for our project was the word physical. The genealogy of the word physical comes from the 15th century and is derived from Latin of the word physicalis of nature. Physical education was first introduced in ancient Greece, China, Egypt, and Rome. All modern activity is derived from one of four original components: military training, educational purposes, learning about how the body moves, medical reasons, and activities for viewer enjoyment, which falls under the performing arts category. In 1823, the sport of gymnastics was introduced into educational settings. The apparatus already being used within the sport was popularized by European educators, as it was their job to ensure their students were physically as well as mentally robust.
There was actually a German educator, Gutsmuth, and his student John, who are considered the grandfathers of putting in place a formal system of physical preparation and inventing a few of the apparatus pieces that were used during these times.
This influence spread to Scandinavia, where Lang developed sophisticated routines to systematically train the body to develop the body's musculature. As we can see, it seems that the start of physical training in an educational setting began through the sport of gymnastics.
What's interesting is that when physical education first came to the United States, girls were pushed into sports such as dance and gymnastics, whereas boys were pushed into the sportier exercises.
That's a really good point that you bring up regarding how males and females are pushed into different sectors of physicality. Quickly going back to our main point of this talk of how bodies are regulated and continuously restructured, we can actually draw a connection here between the early 1800s enforcing separate physical requirements per gender and the role educational settings play into this. This connection could help in understanding how societal views influence what was and still continues to be taught to students.
Before we can dive into physical education in our Western world, it's important to discuss what influenced the change into curriculum which allowed for physical education courses.
In Dessau, Germany, Bastow started physical training in school settings where he developed daily plans for the teachers at school to supervise and ensure students were doing each of the exercises. Simultaneously, John Simon became the first recorded PE teacher who taught mainly gymnastics, but also sports like fencing and horseback riding. This all occurred in 1774. Teaching physical activities requires a skilled trainer who educates or instructs, more specifically, one who prepares another for physical fitness. This term stems from the 1600s and originates from Old French.
Later, Denmark passed the Bill of 1814, which mandated physical education in school curriculums by using gymnastics as a guideline.
In 1823, Hartford Seminary established the first ever girls' private school, which pushed for a healthy and physical life for girls. They taught different aerobics and focused on healthy food choices.
Soon after, in 1825, the first PE teacher came to America.
His name was Charles Beck. He made the first outdoor gymnasium with the first gymnastics program in America. The word gymnasium can be traced to the 1590s from a Latin origin meaning a place of exercise, and then from the Greek term gymnasion, meaning a public area where athletic exercises are done.
Later, in 1853, Boston became the first city to mandate physical education into the curriculum for all schools, after other cities started to follow the lead and included physical education to their curriculum as well.
It was not until 1866 when the first state, California, mandated it into the curriculum to ensure that kids stayed active while educating them on physical education.
In 1885, physical education in schools focused on building foundational body skills. Now let's jump ahead to 1918, where some cardinal principles of education were created. These principles delved into aspects such as attitude towards exercise and having recreational skills, so that students would participate in physical activities outside of their classrooms. The goal of this was to enhance leisure time and make leisure more productive.
Around the same time, there began the rhetoric of PE and a healthy lifestyle being symbiotic. Funny enough, a few years prior to the ideology of enhancing leisure time, we see Fordism being implemented in various aspects of life and education. Fordism is characterized by a culture of efficiency that stresses the need to capitalize off of all labor. Applying this framework to physical education, it is evident that Fordism influenced the development of physicality. Many comparisons from then were being made between machinery and bodies wanting both to be as efficient as possible.
Productivity also relates heavily to the topic of physicality and health being graded. Although grades and grading systems were introduced a while back, this can be indicated as the beginning of grading in PE.
So far, the change has been on micro levels, but during JFK's presidency, he really began pushing for intensive physical education in schools in order to combat the obesity epidemic which was rising in the United States.
The next president to have an explicit policy within health and fitness was former President Johnson, who introduced standardized fitness tests into the education realm. Although students were already being graded, they were now having to follow a standardized test of health and fitness. Further, students were also rewarded based on their athletic performance with a signed certificate by the president.
As a part of the Education Amendment, President Nixon signed a new law called IX in 1972. This guaranteed no one would be discriminated against in any federally funded program. This also allowed for the same educational benefits for all. The genealogy of the word fitness derived in the 1570s and means state of being physically fit.
In 2001, former President Bush passed the No Child Left Behind Act, which was designed to give children more time towards areas of math and reading. This act cut significant time and funding towards physical education courses, resulting in a massive cut in leisure time for students. One consequence of this act is that many schools now don't even require physical education as a part of their daily curriculum.
The Healthy People program was initiated in 2010 and sets standards and goals over a 10-year period for schools' curriculums to follow. Every 10 years, the program is updated to reflect current philosophies in teaching and health education. Having a review and an update every 10 years allows for more clarity towards what part of physical education needs work. The genealogy of health was also analyzed during this project. The word health is Old English and means wholeness, a being whole, sound, or well. In Old Germanic, it means to be whole and uninjured.
So today I'm interviewing Terry, who will be reflecting back to his high school physical education class. So let's start with a little breakdown of what a regular PE class looked like for you.
We were actually given 10 minutes at the beginning of our class to change into our attire, and if we didn't have proper gym attire, then we would lose marks.
So can you actually think back to a specific moment in a class that really stuck out to you?
This one time we were playing soccer and our teacher told us that if we didn't score, we were forced to do planks.
Yeah.
And no one really wanted that punishment.
So was there ever a time where you could sort of just do your own thing in your PE class, or did you have to follow a structure?
Sort of, because people would be lazy on when we were forced to do some laps.
Yeah.
People would jog and then we would just have another punishment to do. No one really wanted to do a plank, but that's why coach was telling us to do a plank.
Yeah.
Is to put everyone through the hard time for not trying.
Okay, so it was kind of like you were never really sure if you were being watched or, or you would receive like a punishment. So you kind of just knew that someone was watching you at all times and that you were going to be punished if you didn't really follow along?
Yeah.
As Terry mentions, in physical education courses, there's a lot of room for independence. Panopticism was a concept introduced by Foucault, which is about surveillance and self-regulation. The famous example given by Foucault is that of panopticon. Panopticon is a prison structure in which there is a watchtower in the middle surrounded by cells. The prisoners within the cells can see each other, but they do not know if they are being watched by the prison guards. The prison guards are within the watchtower and not visible to the prisoners. This causes the prisoners to self-regulate themselves. This self-regulation of oneself and of others through surveillance can be applied to physical education as well. Individuals with a PE class watch each other and themselves, which enforces self-regulation. For example, in Terry's case, the students self-regulated themselves when he mentions how they were not aware if or when the teacher would come outside when running laps, so they would run so that they would not be punished.
Also, on a broader scale, social media controls and forces self-regulation of their bodies, as there are always people watching and you may not know who is watching you. For example, likes or shares on a post may be seen as a way of others viewing you, or an unknown factor not knowing who can see your post can be similar to that of the watchtower panopticism. Relating social media back to PE, it is evident that social media is a tool that can create unrealistic body image goals. This is important to consider, as this is a factor that current physical education classes must take in order to provide a comprehensive education of healthy living.
There are many forms of physical education, such as in-person, online, remote, and so forth. Over the years, the mode and methods of instruction have changed. The traditional method of instruction is in-person. In-person instruction is characterized by group activities and minimal written assessments. With online school becoming a more popular alternative, students now have the option to take physical education online. Online PE is characterized by students learning asynchronously, in which they must take the initiative to teach themselves. Assessments for this type of learning include students submitting videos of themselves doing an activity and completing written assessments. Online education for PE takes away from the socializing aspect of physical education, the goal of promoting collaboration between students.
A newer model of physical education takes on on a blended approach of physical activity and written assessments. In this version of PE, students are expected to understand how their body works and what changes they can make to make a healthy but attainable lifestyle. Such instructions include nutrition, safety, and psychological disorders that can be brought on by a negative body image.
As we've seen, the course of physical education has changed quite a bit over the years. The fundamental aspect of moving has stayed static, and yet the microparts of this have shifted. It seems that physical education began with the intention of introducing the sport of gymnastics, hygiene, and how to take care of the human body. It then shifted to grading individuals based on their ability to perform activities.
Currently, within PE, the emphasis once again lies on educating students about health and activity.
Thank you so much for coming to our Ed Talk this week, and we hope you learned something new about the genealogy of physical education.